Hello and welcome on France 24. I'm Clarisse Fortuné and you're watching Eye on Africa. First, the headlines. An indefinite strike is voted in Ghana by a major union. Members want to force the government to ban gold mining in forests, reserves, farmlands and rivers, which they say destroy the environment. And we have this exclusive interview with Abdulwahid Al-Nur. He's the leader of the Sudan Liberation Army Al-Nur. The armed group is not involved in the conflict in Sudan, but says it wants instead to help civilians displaced by the war. And it's Mental Health Day. Kenya has Africa's highest numbers of therapists, but could artificial intelligence take over? The practice of unlicensed gold mining, known as galamsey, has recently sparked street protests in Ghana. Now, a major union began this Thursday an indefinite strike to force the government to ban mining in forest reserves and farms. Ghana is Africa's largest producer, but now activists are blaming the gold boom for destroying several of the country's water bodies. Here's our Ghana's correspondent, Justice Baidu.
This was supposed to be a strike by all workers in Ghana. The country's trade union congress called it off at the last minute on Wednesday night after the government assured that it was bringing in the military to help rid the country's water bodies of illegal gold miners. This follows weeks of protests in Accra for the menace to be banned entirely. The University Teachers Association of Ghana has over 200,000 members from all public universities in the country. This means that work in the tertiary levels of the country would now ground to a halt.
We were hoping that organized labor would be the voice of the voiceless and to defend the conscience of the society. But leadership of organized labor have sold their conscience, and therefore we realize that we simply cannot be on the same path. And that is why we have to go on the path on which we are right now, because we can't support the inept decision of leadership of organized labor.
A third of the country's forest reserves have now been affected by illegal gold mining, with over 4,000 hectares of forested land now degraded.
As the intelligentsia of society, we teach and we do research. We know exactly what the consequences are for being on the path on which we are treading right now. And so we are just speaking for the voiceless and the vulnerable who wish government could listen to them and do something, but government is completely adamant. And so we know we have the support of the whole country behind us.
As Ghana heads to the polls in December, illegal gold mining has become a big campaign issue ahead of the vote.
NGO Médecins Sans Frontières in Sudan has been forced to stop providing care for 5,000 children with acute malnutrition. Warring parties blocked deliveries of food and medicines at a Zamzam displacement camp in North Darfur. Meanwhile, fighting continues between the Sudanese army and the rapid support forces, particularly around the city of El Fasher. The Sudan Liberation Army Al-Nur is an armed group also present in the region, but has until now refused to get involved in a conflict. It says it is working to help civilians displaced by the war. Bastien Renouille met with its founder, Abdulwahid Al-Nur.
So, Abdulwahid Al-Nur, you are the chairman and co-founder of the Sudan Liberation Movement and of the Sudan Liberation Army, an armed group based in Darfur that's been controlling the Jebel Mara mountains for years. Since the beginning of the war between the Sudanese army and the rapid support forces, you have refused to fight alongside them. What is the current situation in Darfur?
The humanitarian situation is that deteriorated. We evacuate in Al Fasher more than 1 million persons, that we bring them to Jebel Marra. As SLM, we receive these newcomers. Yeah, we provide good security to them, but we don't have food to give them. We don't have shelters to give them. We don't have medicine to give them. And we call and call and call and call, but no one is answering. There's a few from OSHA, UN, but still there is a big, even not 1% of food of the needed by people
In June, the United Nations published a communique saying that it was difficult to cross your territories, that they needed permits, and that SLA was slowing down the delivery of humanitarian assistance. Did you manage to improve the situation?
We are not opposing. We deal with UN more than 23 years now. But if there is new organization, they must register, we must know them. We don't want also to be infiltrated. But there is no another, precondition.
The fighting in Darfur is very violent at the moment, especially around the city of El Fasher, the capital of North Darfur. The Rapid Support Forces have been besieging the city since May. What can be done to stop this attack?
Fasher is not a strategic city. If the people want power, power is in Khartoum or elsewhere. But unfortunately, because the greedy and power hunger, now we see this catastrophe. Some people there are getting the civilian as a shelter for them. And this is unfortunate, it's bad.
Here in Nairobi, you've been advocating to end this conflict in Sudan. You have met with several political parties, with civil society. What could be the solution to end the conflict? And is there a solution, actually?
We want all of us to create a new and the largest civil front ever in our country. First, to stop this war and end it, and to be a voice, a true voice of the Sudanese. We're not a part of that war, simply because we want to create a secular, liberal, federal, democratic Sudan based on equal citizenship right, and the region should be separate from the state. And this vision, we can't do it with SAF, and we can't do it with RSF.
But you think that a civil front can stop both General Burhan and General Hemeti to fight?
This front will be a true Sudanese representative, civil representative. So we can go to two generals and we'll tell them now why you are fighting. They will say they are fighting for Sudanese. We will tell them we are the Sudanese, and this is our concerns. We don't want you to fight on behalf of us. We want this war to be stopped immediately. It is not war of us, it is war of you.
Artificial intelligence is transforming the fight against mental health crisis. In Kenya, more than 2 million individuals suffer from depression, with a concerning suicide rate of 11 per 100,000. And despite having one of Africa's highest numbers of therapists, Kenya is critically under-resourced. Innovative startups are now using AI to fill the gaps left by traditional services, providing support to address severe shortages and stigma. Olivia Bizot reports.
Behind these metal panels is northern Kenya's only rehabilitation centre. Patients like Eric have long struggled to access the mental health care they need. 1 in 4 Kenyans experience psychological issues, according to the National Medical Research Institute. But there are only 100 psychiatrists in the country to help them.
Some don't even walk outside because of that stigma. They just go to an enclosed place like this one. The only way to get help, they must come to the headquarters, because at the outskirts there are no any facilities.
But a new solution is now emerging.
I'll give you this phone so that you can do the survey.
AI-driven questionnaires evaluate people's mental health and connect them with professionals. The technology is driven by startups like Talia Psychotherapy. Their survey has now reached more than 1 million people nationwide.
So we are using AI to personalize the care that we provide to the end user. So what normally happens is the user is required to do a few surveys or a few questions. Based on the way they answer the questions, they are taken down a path that is dependent on the care they require.
The company is also launching an AI-driven calling service that analyzes voice patterns to detect mental health issues early.
It's able to tell if you have some level of anxiety, your stress levels are a bit escalated than normal stressors. Then that way, it now picks you to the next level.
This could lead to an appointment with a professional. In Kenya, over a quarter of hospital visits are related to psychological issues. Yet less than 1% of the national health budget is allocated to mental health.
South Africa's Komati coal-fired power plant has been silent since its shutdown 2 years ago. It was considered at the time a pioneering move in the world's transition to green energy. But 2 years on, those who lost their jobs in the process are still struggling. Plans to repurpose South Africa's oldest coal power plant might be a cautionary tale for countries intending to reduce their reliance on fossil fuels and switch to renewables. Laurent Bersécher.
It used to be the crown jewel of South Africa's coal industry, but the Komati power plant is now completely empty. Its shutdown in 2022 was supposed to herald a new era of energetic transition for the country, yet 2 years later almost nothing has changed, and some 400 former workers are still waiting for the employment opportunities they were promised.
When we lost our jobs here at Eskom, it's affected the Komati community in a big way. Some people were left with nothing.
South African energy giant Eskom had vowed to create hundreds of new jobs and to convert the Komati power plant from coal to renewable energy. But to date, only a few minor projects have seen the light of day, something which Eskom blames on administrative delays and a lack of organization which prevented it from beginning construction in time. The company says it's now learned from its mistakes as South Africa prepares to close 5 more coal power plants by 2030.
Yeah, technically we should have done things earlier, so we would consider it not a success. But we've learned from that, and other stations are now applying lessons learned from Komati.
South Africa is the world's 12th biggest greenhouse gas emitter and still depends on coal for 80% of its power. In 2021, it became the first nation to sign a just energy transition partnership at the COP26. It's since received over 13 billion euros in loans and subsidies, but has so far little to show for it.
Now, if you're planning to go to South Africa, make sure you stay away from places where you might run into snakes. Experts are warning of a shortage of antivenom that could leave thousands without access to the crucial treatment. Production stopped 4 years ago, and South Africa, being the only antivenom producer on the continent, it means that other countries in the region are also vulnerable. Tom Kennedy explains.
Snake season has arrived in South Africa. Home to some of the deadliest snakes in the world, around 4,000 people are bitten here every year. But now there's one problem. There's no antivenom. Due to production delays, only 15% of snakebite victims have access to treatment. This father of 3 says the shortage makes him nervous for his kids.
The first thing, I am scared of snakes. So if they say there's no cure, I feel uncomfortable. For me and my culture, I kill it. I don't want to lie to you.
The shortage appears to be reflective of a broader issue. Steve Meehan is a professional snake handler on the Western Cape. He says the antivenom shortage has been caused by load shedding and government mismanagement of the production facility.
Very frustrating because people die. It's a serious issue, and it costs people their lives, it costs people their limbs, because obviously the quicker you can get antivenom, especially when something like a puff adder bites you, the quicker you can start treating the symptoms of the bite and limiting the amount of flesh that gets destroyed, the amount of damage that happens. So not only are you saving lives, but you're saving limbs.
South Africa is the only antivenom producer on the continent, meaning a shortage here is felt across Africa.
The lack of antivenom in South Africa does affect a variety of other African countries because many of them are using our antivenom and now they don't really have access to that. So that's catastrophic.
A short-term solution is to import an Indian-made product called Panaf Premium, but that is twice as costly and the national healthcare system is already under financial pressure. So snakebite experts are calling for more transparency and efficiency in the government's anti-venom production process.
I don't know if snakes are part of his dire assessments from the WWF. A study on 35,000 populations of more than 5,000 species of mammals, birds, amphibians, reptiles, and fish shows accelerating declines across the globe. That's over 70% in the last half-century, and mostly due to human pressures. The biggest decline is found in populations of freshwater species. And the continent by continent, the average decline reached 95% in Latin America and the Caribbean, followed by Africa down to 76%. And the report also says changes could be irreversible with devastating consequences for humanity. And this report concludes our edition. Thank you for watching Eye on Africa. Stay on France 24 for more news.
Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith.
All the latest in politics, economics and the arts in Africa on France 24. Our journalists are in every region, every country, to report on the emergence of a continent of unparalleled riches, bringing you Africa's stories on France 24.
Thanks for joining us. Peace again. Take care.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.